Hey, and welcome back to another fine episode of Who Said Photography. One of the things that we as photographers need to know is post-processing. And to do that, we need to know the color theory for photographers. Cool word. So for those of us that are around, the actual color wheel that we have for fine art doesn't work, believe it or not, and we're going to show you why. So today online, we have Blake Rudis from F64 Academy and F64 Elite, and he and I will be going through color theory for photographers. Blake, how you doing?
Good. How about yourself, Bob?
Good. So this is your first time being on the show. So tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I started out as a fine artist, pretty much. I got my degree in printmaking, and I kind of self-declared sculpture in there because I did a lot of sculpture courses. But after school, I didn't really have the ability for printing presses and all the heavy equipment, so I went into painting. So I kind of painted my whole life, painted a little bit here, painted a little bit there, in the process of doing all the other things that I was doing. And somehow stumbled upon a camera to take pictures of the things that I was painting. And then I got really into photography. Started in 1999 with a film camera, Canon AE1, and dabbled in it, but didn't really get too far into photography until the digital world with HDR processing, because I like the process of HDR photography. I like, how meticulous it is to build upon the steps in post-processing. So right now I kind of pride myself in a workflow. I don't know if you want to call it an expert or something like that, but that's the thing that I like to do. I like to develop workflows to make you more efficient, and in the process get beyond a comprehension level of things like tone and color and actually understand what it is that you're doing, so that when you go into post-processing, there's no question. I know what I'm doing because I know what I need to do with tone, and I know what I need to do with color. And a big part of that comes from my background with color theory as a painter. So there are a lot of color theory studies in my painting days that transitioned very well into photography.
Awesome. Great. Okay, so let's start with why the color wheel doesn't work in Photoshop. What are the differences?
The main difference is I call it the digital color wheel as opposed to the regular color wheel or the painter's color wheel. The painter's color wheel, your complementary colors are going to be red and green because that's how it works on the color wheel when you have red, yellow, and blue. But the difference is that in the digital world, we have additive color and subtractive color. The color that's seen on screens and the color that's put on a print. The color that's put on a print is CMYK. The color that we see on our screens is pretty much RGB, or red, green, and blue. So how you know that the digital color wheel is different is if you go into Photoshop with a color wheel and you look at the color red. If you were to press Control-I or Command-I to invert it, the opposite color of red in Photoshop will be cyan. The most highest saturation form of red will be cyan. However, on the painter's color wheel, if you were to invert the color red or move it directly opposite on the color wheel, you're looking at green. So we have to kind of take the idea of the painter's color wheel and not discredit it and leave it alone, but just push it off to the side for a little bit while you work on your digital images, because we're working with additive color and subtractive color. So I don't like to use those two terms, because the minute you say that, people are like, forget it. He just said additive and subtractive, and I don't like math. But it doesn't really, don't think about it like math. The basic concept is anything you invert or reverse in Photoshop, or any program for that matter, you will see what the opposite is of that color. And how that helps us as photographers is that we can better understand our images and how to post-process them if we understand what its complement is. For instance, in the painting world, if I was painting a robust landscape and my greens were very saturated, there's a couple things that I could do. I could add a little bit of white to tone them down a little bit. I could even add a little bit of red to those greens to tone down the color green. Or I could add more red around the color green, right? Here we are in the photography world. If my reds in my picture are just blowing up the image, instead of controlling the saturation in the color red, if I were to add a little bit of cyan to that color red, it will subdue that color red. So understanding color theory from a painter's perspective, bringing that into the world of photography, you have a big advantage of of knowing exactly what's going to happen to the colors when you do this. When I do this to a curve with this color, this is going to happen. So getting into curves is a whole different thing, because the opposite of the red channel would be cyan if you were to invert the luminance of the red channel. And that's a whole nother can of worms that ends up the opposite of blue is going to be yellow, and the opposite of green is going to be magenta. So red, green, we typically looked at in the painter's world, red, yellow, and blue were the primary colors. And red, yellow, and blue are the primary colors because you cannot make red, yellow, and blue. Those colors cannot be made by mixing any other colors in the color world when you talk about pigments and paints. But now things kind of change a little bit when you get in the digital world. The primary colors, I actually think that there's about 6 primary colors in the digital world. You've got red, green, and blue, cyan, magenta, and yellow.
Correct. And on my desk, and probably on your desk, is a color wheel. Which took me a long time to get the right colors to print out. But you know what? Let's go back. You wrote a book. You have a full course on color theory for photographers. And this is why I wanted to have you on the show, because the course just blew my mind. It went back, if I go back to using the color wheel for a fine art photographer or for anything else, you basically have taken this to another level, another step, and it's basically based on Photoshop. So colors affect us emotionally and ideologically, where things like that. Now, you've in your book, in your PDF file, you explain to what colors affect each of us. Can you go through that again for us? I know you've got a PDF on this.
Yep, I'm looking at it over here on the side. The basic idea behind color, and this, you can give generalizations of color, but it's the same thing as giving generalizations of people. So I can generally say that the color red, if used in some instances, will be violent. But at the same time, the color red can invoke power. It can invoke strength. But on the flip side of things, the negative side of it, we have positives and negatives to each color. And each person is going to be affected by those colors differently. I personally don't really care too much for the color red. I just never really have. But I love the color blue. It does things to me emotionally that I connect to that color in ways that I don't connect to other colors out there. That's why a lot of the stuff in my promotional materials for F64 Academy is hashtag 2489C3. That's the HTML code for the color that I love so much. But colors will do things to us, and we don't know what it's going to do to the viewer. But what we do know is that when we use these colors in these certain ways, we can change the entire mood of a scene. We can change the mood of a scene. So if we have a picture of a tree and we envelope that tree in the color blue, it'll be calming. It'll make us feel at peace. But if we envelope that tree in the color red or orange, it's going to be violent. It's going to give us feelings of that tree is going to burn. But if we envelope it in blue, it's subtle. We're calmed. Our nerves get calmed. Blue typically does calm us. If you look at the fast food world, look at all the fast food industries as you're driving down the highway. Look at the colors that they use. They use red and yellow because red and yellow actually make us hungry. Colors can physically move us too. So when you know the aspects of color and you bring that into your editing world, you can now manipulate the viewer with color without them even knowing it. It's subliminal. And when it's used effectively subliminally, you, the artist photographer, have complete control over the viewer's experience. But you don't know how they're going to experience that color. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of red, but I love the color blue. If I see the color blue in there, I'm gonna gravitate towards that image. I will see that in a gallery and I will beeline towards it because I love that color. So you have to think about these things when you're post-processing your images. If colors are extremely saturated, they're gonna come off as violent to our eyes. Our eyes don't like super saturated things. So those are things to keep in mind when it comes to mood and color and how people perceive things based off of what is in front of them.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. That makes sense. I understand that. So in curves, we can add the opposite color, and it will bring down the tone. So you've got a really good explanation in the book on how primers and the other colors. I haven't got the book in front of me. Bring up your PDF for us, please.
Share screen.
And just, I would like these people to see exactly how a lot of these colors work together. Because you've got this great example on yours for color interaction. So if we can just kind of go through this and how it actually works, because
like this one.
Yeah, on this one here, it's the center square on this is the same color.
Right.
But you can see because of the white and the black, the differences be how the gray and the black works and the gray and the white works.
Yes.
But it's not just this is a simple way of looking at it. But if you move up a little bit to some of the other colors, so this is even more interesting. So you've got the red and the cyan here. And the squares are the exact same. So my question is, because I've been using Photoshop for like 10 years, and it's like some of this stuff never came to my mind. How did you pick up on this?
Really, one thing I did, this is an interesting one right here. Just talk about this before I get into that. You talk about color intensity based off of this. If you actually were to take this and turn this into a black and white image, this gray square is the same value as this blue. This gray square is the same value as this yellow, and these blue and yellows are the same value. So if you were to desaturate this image and take all the color out of it, it would be all the same color gray. But you see the intensity difference that's happening in this when this gray is on this blue and when this gray is on this yellow. So even though tonally, they're all the same color. If you were to turn this into a black and white image, all the tones are the same. That's the interesting thing about color intensity and how color works. Now, where I got into this, when I was painting, I was doing a lot of, do you want me to stop sharing my screen now?
Sure.
Okay. When I was painting, I challenged myself to paint two identical paintings. They were about this big. So they were only about maybe 8 inches by 8 inches. But the whole idea was anything I painted on this side, I would paint in reverse on this side, and I would try to invert the colors in my mind. So my goal was to try and understand color theory. And this is funny because this is the important part in the painting world versus the digital world. And you're going to understand why this is funny in a second. So I painted this image, this painting to look exactly like this one. It was all abstraction, right? So if I used blue over here, I used orange over here. If I used red over here, I used green over here. So I painted both of these paintings to be completely reversed and inverted as far as the color spectrum is concerned. So when I brought that image into Photoshop and I inverted it, none of my colors were what I painted on the other one. And I was so pissed at myself. Like literally, I was mad because my colors didn't match. But if you think about it, the color in the painting world is not the same as the color in the digital world. And it wasn't until 10 years later that I discovered that. And then the light bulb clicked. So the paintings that I painted are the right inverses of each other in the painting color wheel world. So then when I started to dive into color for color theory for photographers, I realized, wait a second, that painting probably was right in the painting world, but it wasn't right in the digital world because the inverse of blue would be yellow. So I should have painted yellow. But the inverse on the painter's color wheel versus the digital color wheel. So once I discovered that there's a huge difference here, I had to dive into it a little bit deeper. And that's where all this stuff came in with color theory for photographers. I was like, okay, if painters use this color theory so much to control the viewers, and we love the paintings that we see in Da Vinci and Van Gogh and all these Cezanne and these great painters of the day, they studied color theory extensively. They put themselves through all kinds of challenges with their color theory to get you to feel something when you looked at their paintings, not just with their paint strokes, but also with the color choices. But a lot of times as photographers, we don't think to that level of editing our images. We think literally based on what we've seen, which actually puts us at a hindrance as photographers. As photographers, we're already at a hindrance. Painters have a great niche or genre of the arts, if you want to call it that, because when you look at a painting, You're looking at the color, you're looking at the brush strokes, you're looking at the paint application. You have three things that you're looking at when you're looking at that image. What are you looking at with a photograph? You're looking at a flat picture of something that your brain already recognizes. So viewer retention on a photograph is only about maybe 5 to 8 seconds. Viewer retention on a painting can be anywhere from a minute to 3 minutes, because they can captivate you with not only color, but also with brush strokes, with the subject matter, and how they develop the scene. As photographers, we typically don't get that opportunity. I can't say, hey, Half Dome, can you move over a little bit to the left? And I can't paint Half Dome in Yosemite moved over, but you can paint it wherever you want to. The thing about photography, we take literal things. We take pictures of literal things. So what control do we have? Sometimes we don't have control over the subject matter. We definitely don't have control over the weather if you're a landscape photographer. I can tell someone to move their chin if I'm doing a portrait, but the next level of photography post-processing then comes with color and how you see color and how you let the viewer see those colors. So color theory is critical. If you don't understand it and you're post-processing your images, you're missing a huge element to your control over the viewer.
Yeah, well, see, this is where I was about 6 months ago, was trying to understand color theory. I just wasn't able to capture it. Like I said, I was using an older color wheel. I understand the opposite between the two, but I really didn't understand how Photoshop worked with color and how I can make certain colors pop and make things work. So after your course, and your course basically, again, tone, color, and effects, with those three ideas in there, I was able to better understand how I can control my colors and what items I want to make sure that are popping off the page. Because there's so much there that you want to make sure that the image that I've done, my mind, what I see is the viewer is seeing the same sort of idea. And we can control that with color.
Right.
One of the biggest things that, again, blew my mind away was how I control color with curves.
Mm-hmm.
I had,
powerful.
Very powerful. Was it, I think it was one of your courses that I took, or one of your YouTube videos I watched. I'm sure it was you. If it wasn't, I apologize.
That's fine.
Basically, it's curves are curves, or levels is level, but curves can be levels and curves.
Right. Yeah. Yep.
And some of these things, like, just blow my mind. It's like I've been using Photoshop like I said 10 years.
Curves are three-dimensional. They are.
Yeah, it really is. It's very, very powerful, and I don't think really understand it.
One of the things about that course is in the Zone System Express. I go over tone, color, and artistic effects. And when you segregate a color onto a curve, you now have complete control over that color as a painter would. Now, if you're in Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom and you move the red slider and you change the hue, the saturation, the lightness, red actually has a little bit, because you're dealing with the red channel, has a little bit of yellow in it, has a little bit of orange. So when you move that, you're not getting a good, real collection of the color red. When you segregate red onto its own mask and you adjust the curve, you can now say, okay, red, I need you to get darker in the darkest areas of red, but stay light here, because I don't want you to move here. And then you can say, okay, well, red, I need you to get a little bit more red. So you can go into the red channel of the color red and say, boom, just a little bit more red. Then you can go into the blue channel and make that red a little bit more yellow. So now you basically, if you imagine yourself with a palette in your hand, mixing paints and putting it on your photograph, that's what you're doing. You're becoming a painter of not only light now, but also a painter of color. And some people will say, well, doesn't that get into the realm of, not displaying, actual what was actually there? Well, for the most part, you do get into an artistic realm that way. But if you're not doing things for photojournalistic sake and you're doing things for art's sake, anything goes. Anything goes. Change that red to purple. I don't care. If you think that looks good, do what you feel that you need to do to get that image to look like you imagined it. I mean, it's in your head.
It's in your head. That's exactly it. You're the one that was at the scene, or the
right.
You took the picture from. But yeah, okay. So people have to understand too, like if you had a curves level and you want to make an adjustment bring down the reds, and you bring it down. You've got a great little page on that one as well, that you can add cyan to it. And I don't think a lot of people understand that.
Yeah, so this is a basic selection from, when we're talking about the curve. The curve is right here. This bottom portion is your darkest darks, the middle portion is your midtones, and the top portion is your lights. So people know that when you manipulate a curve on an RGB level or the luminance level, you move it up, it gets lighter, you move it down, it gets darker. That's the simplest form. And that's what this shows. But what they don't show in Photoshop or any other program that I've ever seen, when you go into the red channel of a curve, the top, when you move it up, gets more red. When you move it down, it doesn't get lighter or darker when you do this. It increases or decreases the intensity of the red channel. So increase the intensity, make it more red. Decrease intensity, make it more cyan. Same thing with the green channel. The opposite of green, if you move it up, is green. Or the opposite would be magenta, and then blue and yellow. And that's why I showed the color wheel down here also, to show you that the color wheel is definitely different when it comes to the digital world. And this is why. This is your proof that the color wheel is different in the digital world, because we're dealing with additive color and subtractive color. We're dealing with what we see on our monitors and what we see in print. And those have to be paired up in the digital world. In order for you to take a digital image and print it, you have to have some kind of equal balance of, red doesn't necessarily print. You have CMYK, cyan, magenta, and yellow.
Well, that's exactly it. Yeah. So again, this is one of those things that when I read this, it's like I had to go to the computer and try this.
Yeah.
It's not that I didn't believe you. I had to go try it.
No, you have to. It's addicting. It's one of those things that, I'm not done. I have got so I love it. I get so charged by this, because there's so much to discover in the world of color theory for photographers. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of people that do a whole lot of research on it. And when they do, they typically do it to a level that you can't comprehend. It's like, okay, this guy's way over my head. He's talking about ones and zeros and dots and pixels, and I just need to know what's happening when I do this. And that's the big thing. It's not just being able to know technically what happens, but also be able to respond to it as an artist when you do it.
Well, that's exactly it. And once you kind of understand it, excuse me, with your color wheel, once you understand it, you know what's going to happen. It's not playing anymore. It's understanding exactly what's happening with Photoshop and how it's going to affect one another. So in your book, you say you can edit a photo in, I'm thinking 2 or 7 minutes. Very short.
Very short amount of time, especially, if I'm doing my process, which is very layer intensive, lots of layers, but not labor intensive. It's 7 to 10 minutes. I'm editing a photo, but what it was before was anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours, because I didn't know what I was doing. I would just dabble, but when you understand tone and you understand all of those 256, amount of data that's there from 0 to 255, that's tone. Now you get into color. There's millions of colors, millions. And depending on the color space you're in, there could be billions of colors. So color it's not as simple as tone. But when you start working with the two of them together and you understand that tone is what it is, but color can be used for tone and tone can be used for color, now you're getting relationships that are happening between the level of color and tone. That's why I teach the tone, color, and artistic effects. I don't care what you're editing or what you're doing. If you pay attention to tone first, then move into color, and then go into artistic effects, there's no question. You know what you need to do. You don't open a photo and say, okay, what am I going to do today with this? Yesterday I did this. And a lot of that comes down to what are you using to do that? I limit myself to maybe 1 or 2 programs. I don't do anything outside of those 1 or 2 programs, because we get this influx. Like right now, especially in our industry, there is a new plugin or program coming out for photo editing every month, it seems. And you've got all these different things out there. I'm not going to mention any names because I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. But there's so many places that you can edit. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go to all of them. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to use every program and plugin that you have. Tone, color, artistic effects. And a big part of that comes down to understanding color theory.
Yeah. Okay. So a valid point. Now, in your book, you also have a picture. You're going to bring this up for me. because I want to discuss this image. You have a picture of a barn, and this to me amplifies on opposite colors and how they interact. So you've got a picture of a barn with the sky that's really beautiful, and you're looking for it now.
I am.
And I want to go over this one because people need to know how this kind of works. So you've got opposite colors. You've got, well, I'm going to let you explain it. So,
Yep.
so you explain it. So, and it works so well together. At HDR again, Blake and I are both heavy in the HDR.
That one right there?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, when you look at complementary colors and color control, one of the things that works with this is complementary color relationships here is green and magenta would be complementary colors. But you also have kind of like the split complement concept. You have the ideas of color theory for painters don't necessarily get thrown out the window, but how we edit our images does. Okay. So with this image, you've got a purple sky and a green foliage. Both of them are purposely exaggerated for the sake of color harmony. In the painting world, green and purple actually are complementary colors, right?
Yeah.
But in the digital color wheel, as we've discussed, green and magenta are. So you use the opposite colors in the color spectrum in the digital world to emphasize what it is with the color relationships that people are used to seeing. People are not used to seeing green and magenta as being a harmonious combination, but they are used to seeing purple and green as a harmonious composition. Look at things like sports. Look at their uniforms. The uniforms that they wear are often complementary colors. If they aren't monochromatic, they're most of the time they're going to be like my high school and my college colors were yellow and gold, or gold and blue, or yellow and blue, because yellow and blue have that relationship, that harmonious relationship. But then you also see other football teams with the yellow, with the green, or with the blue and orange, right? The ideas that you bring into the editing process when it comes to color theory, you don't necessarily throw all of the painting stuff out the window, because you still need to have those harmonious color relationships. So in this example, you're seeing a purple sky with green, and there's a slight balance in there with the yellow that's happening in between, or the orange that's happening in between, depending on what monitor and how it's calibrated that you're looking at. But that is kind of like an accent color to offset that balance, to create some tension within the image, but it still works. Those two colors are not, they aren't fighting for, they're kind of fighting for your attention away from that yellow or that orange. So you still have, you use these color theory concepts to edit your images. If you look at the image over here, there's, green and magenta in the sky, or green and purple in the sky. You've got yellows and blues and blues and oranges that are happening here. So a lot of times these things are exaggerated during the editing process to make the viewer's experience more harmonious. But you can't really edit those colors to that extreme until you know what happens when you do modify those colors. Because if you take one color to a whole nother level that the other colors aren't at, then you lose the harmonious balance. And oftentimes that's when people say, I love this image, but I'm not sure what's right with it. I'm not sure what's wrong with it. Well, look at your colors. Look at your color wheel.
Good point. Good point. Now that was complementary colors. So basically complementary are basically opposite colors that attract. So the next one after that is analogous.
Analogous. Yep.
Analogous. So let's look at those and explain that to people so they understand what exactly is going on. Because there's many ways to use the color wheel on here. So I can't even pronounce it.
Analogous, yeah. Analogous color relationships are any relationships that happen in a grouping of three around the color wheel. So if you were to kind of draw like a pizza shape and move that pizza shape around the color wheel, you'll see where analogous colors come in. And if we look here, I think right here, we even have a picture of what an analogous color scheme would look like. So you see this little pizza wedge here, yellows and greens together would create a very harmonious grouping of colors. So if we look down here and we see some of these color relationships that are happening in these images, we've got the blues, the magentas, the purples, a little bit of the reds kind of working together in that analogous color scheme with this image. Now, it does still have some other color in it, but the dominant color scheme that's happening here is that analogous color scheme. The truth be told, did the sky look like that? Not necessarily. I exaggerated it. I exaggerated it because I wanted to create color harmony in there and give a little bit of tension with some of the sky and how it was moving. It's also a blend of a long exposure and a regular image. You can see the long exposure of the clouds kind of moving into the stagnant kind of clouds. If you saw the full image, you would see it even better. This image right here, you've got your yellows, your browns, and your greens that all work together in this image. There really is no other colors here, maybe with a hint of red, but it's analogous color scheme. The hint of red is more of like an accent. Here, another one, yellows, greens, browns, that's an analogous color concept. Those are those colors that are working together that are in very close proximity to one another on the color wheel.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, totally see that. So now there's still one more we'd like to go over. That's kind of like the split.
Yeah, the split complement is a little bit interesting. If you look up at the actual color wheel here, you have split complements would be your predominant color would be cyan. And then the colors that you're using to create that harmony are opposite but split. So you're going to the primary colors, if you're looking at this example, are the big circles. The secondary colors are the little circles. So the way a split complement works, it would go from the complement, the main color on the bottom over to the other side, and then add a little bit of the secondary colors. Which typically how that would work, in the painting world, you might get a little bit different in your split complements than you do here. But the main color here would be our blue or our cyan colors that are happening here. And the split would be over to these greens and yellows and stuff. So same thing is happening here. We've got reds and cyans that are working together, but cyan or a lightish cyan color opposite the color wheel will be red, splitting over to some yellow and some green. And then the same thing is happening here in this image where you have your blues that are moving over into your yellows and splitting over into maybe a little bit of your reds and your oranges. But blue is the primary color, and then its complement would be yellow, and then it splits over to the other colors that are there. There's many more. That's not all. Actually, in the graphic design world, you'll find that there's a ton more color relationships. These are the three most basic that I often talk about for photographers because they're the easiest to pull off, and they make the most sense for color harmony. Another one is monochromatic. Well, monochromatic is simple. It's just an all blue photo that's intensity changes based on the amount of white or black that's in it. However, it doesn't have to just be blue, but that's the color that we're using here. You can still get little hints of color in there from other colors, but the primary color relationship that you're talking about right here would be this monochromatic blue. And then the same thing over here with these kind of sepia tone color here, and then you got like a greenish type of monochromatic image down here. But those are the color relationships that I talk about most, because those are the ones that are, especially for photographers, number one, they're the easiest to understand because it's just opposite the color wheel for the most part, and then what's in close proximity on the color wheel for the most part. But they also create the most balance and unity in the most controlled way in a photograph. Some of the other ones are very difficult to come across. All you have to do is do a Google search for color theory or color relationships, and you're going to come up with, tons. And people make them up as they go. It's just like composition. I mean, you can say that the rule of thirds is the way you're supposed to do. No, it's not. Look at the painters. The greatest painters created the most complex compositions, and there's no rule to them. But when you look at them, it's like, oh, that's why that works, because of all these triangles that are taking me to where they need to go. So these color relationships that I'm talking about are they're a cookie cutter, Use these. When in doubt, go to these.
When in doubt, I like that. When in doubt, use these. Yeah. No, you got a point. But there's so much to know in the theory of color. Like you said, you've pointed out the basics on here, and you've got so many places you can go with it. Again, it's mind-boggling at times, especially once you start to play with the curves, once you start to play with the hue saturation sort of idea. Once you understand what you're trying to do and emphasize in the photo, you can now make adjustments within those colors. So if you want your reds to stand out, you can.
The thing about this is that experimentation is now free. I mean, it really is. And I used to get intimidated when I would go into post processing. I'd open up a new panel or a new pane and be like, ooh, I don't know what this does, so I'm not going to touch it. And I'd just gently close it as I walked away and went to what I was comfortable with. But the difference is that when I used to print in the darkroom, I would take my images, I'd bring them into the darkroom, I'd print my negatives, I'd then make prints from my negatives, and then I'd have a print that I wanted to work on. If I started to add color to it, or depending on what I did to it, if I lost that print during that experimentation, I lost hours, countless hours on something that could not be recovered. But we live in a world of non-destructive editing where you cannot break it. You can't. It's impossible. So, you asked, where does this stuff come from? Where did you start getting this interest? Well, the interest came in was, if there's something I don't know, I'm not going to stop until I understand it. I'm not going to stop until I get beyond the comprehension level. Comprehension is one thing, but getting beyond that comprehension level to the why, not what is this doing or how is it doing it, but why is this doing this? That's the level that we need to get to with color theory, with just about everything in the post-processing. So I challenge anyone that's watching this that if there's something that you open in Photoshop, in On1, Topaz, or whatever programs or plugins you use to edit your photos, don't be intimidated by it. It can't hurt you. It definitely won't bite. I promise it won't bite. The only thing you can do is learn from it. How you get to this level of comprehension with color theory is by experimenting with curves. Break things, take them to beyond their limits, to the point that they cannot take that anymore, and then taper it back. And one of the things that I've shown before is that you can get some really disgusting color in an adjustment layer, but you drop that opacity down to like 10%, change the blend mode to color, and it'll actually look pretty beautiful. I've used some of the worst, most garish, nasty looking gradient maps you've ever seen in your life, but take them down to about 10%, change the blend mode to color, and you can get some really nice color graded effects on your images. How do you get to that point though? You don't look at that and say, you have to find the good within the bad. And this is kind of going into a whole different can of worms. It's just like life. I've been dealt some really bad hands on some things, but there's two ways you can look at that. You can say, oh, that's horrible, I can't recover from this. Or you can say, oh, wow, I learned a lot of things in the process of that bad thing happening. And there's good that happens in that. Same thing happens in post-processing. I've done some of the worst, most nasty, most garish things that you can do to a photograph. But I've said, you know what? In all this disgust, look at how much detail came out in those lights. Okay, I can use that. I can taper that opacity down. I can make a mask. And that now becomes a technique. I had a painting instructor in college that said that we had to make a bad painting and a good painting. And that was our goal for the week. And I was perplexed. I was like, dude, how am I supposed to make a bad painting? I don't make bad things, But what did I do? I referred to things that I did not like. At the time, I did not like Jackson Pollock, and I could not stand Jasper Johns. I didn't like the fact that Jasper Johns would just recreate things that he saw in the world, specifically when it came to icons and iconic imagery. And I didn't like the fact that Jackson Pollock would throw paint all over a canvas. So what I did was I made a Jasper Johns meets Jackson Pollock painting. I fell in love with it because I understood that Jackson Pollock did it for the movement. He did it for the feeling of creating art. And that was a time when video was becoming very popular. So when he was doing these things, he would be dancing on his paintings. He'd be putting cigarette butts out in them. I mean, you'd find brushes still stuck in his giant paintings because to him, it was just the act of doing. Jasper Johns, it was the iconic imagery. So I combined them and I loved it. What I learned from that in the photo world is that you can make the worst possible adjustments to your images and still get a good recovery from it if you understand that there's good things in every bad thing that you do. To get to this level of color theory, I had to break a lot of things. I had to make things look really nasty to understand that level. To get to that level of, okay, how do you get beyond comprehension? Well, you just do it and you fail through it. And you make notes as you fail to get to the success level.
Yeah, see, I'm once people understand your color wheel and the theory of color, I think their images in their post-processing will actually go to the next level. I think with your help, I've gone to the next level on a lot of my work. But as you say, we've discussed this before, you spend hours playing at night in Photoshop. I've tried that. It just doesn't work for me because I just go, what am I doing? One of the things that you use, and I'm going to go off topic of this, and I don't fully understand it. You use a lot of blend if.
Mm-hmm.
You believe in the blend if. I use blend if, and I just go, what the heck is doing? I understand it's easier to use in masks, and you can pick out your colors. But for me, the blend if is still not a novelty. It's one of those things I just don't fully comprehend. And it's just, maybe I'll get to it. There's a lot of things that you do for color gradients afterwards and solid colors over, where I don't fully understand why I'm doing those things. And I believe that's part of your course as well. And part of this, I don't, I get it. I understand how I can change the mood of images by adding a gradient over top. I understand how I can change the mood of adding a solid color and bringing it down. A lot of times, it'll actually pull it together. But it's kind of like one of those things where it's like, yeah, I never seem to pick the right color. I think that's for me where this comes in really handy, is getting better at picking the right color for these overlays, and tying the whole thing. You know what? I watch you way too much, and I forget how these videos. You did one the other day that I thought was really good, cinematic look, on actually changing the colors in your shadows and working to change the colors on the shadows. So how do you find out what color you want to work with the shadow colors? That, to me, it's like, yeah, I watched that. I fully understood it. No idea why I want to do it. Why am I changing?
Well, the image has to speak to you too. I mean, you have to look at the image and you have to get some emotive quality from it and say, okay, based on this image, I need it to be warmer or colder. Do I want it to be warmer or do I want it to be colder? What mood do I want to get from this? And from there, you can adjust that curve to do so. One of the things that's going to happen here within the next month is I'm creating a whole new course with a whole new Photoshop extension, that I think you'll finally get it. I really do, because, and I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean that in a way that I'm going to teach this to like the 100 level to 400 level of color theory, because it has to be taught that way to understand this panel. This panel is basically this panel being extension for Photoshop is like jumping into my mind to see how I think about things from a painter's perspective in a digital photographer's world. And it's incredible. I mean, the things that I'm able to do in it, I don't even understand how I'm able to do in it. And I know what I'm doing, like that's the cool part about it. But I'm building the training now, and it's one of those things it's very difficult. It's not easy because I can't show you color theory. I can't write a 90 or whatever 65-page ebook, 57-page ebook on color theory and have you understand it. I can't write a 200-page book on color. I can't write a 2,000-page book on color theory and have you understand it, because you are going to react to color in different ways. Our technical mind wants us to be able to wrap our brain around this, but our artistic mind is saying, no, you can't wrap your head around this. You have to experiment with it. You have to see what these colors are doing to you, how they make you feel. And at that point, you'll get beyond comprehension. So a lot of times we get hung up on the technical, and we need to look more at the ethereal level. What is this intrinsically, what is happening with me with this color?
I understand that. What emotion is this picture drawing out at you, and why do I want certain colors into it? What style am I going for? Because there's all sorts of styles there. HDR to me is a style. Orton effect, it's a style. Duotone, it's a style that you may or may not like. So that's where the color theory will actually come into to let you to expand on your style and where you want to go. Experimentation is absolutely paramount to a lot of these things. So for me, I have a long way to go. So that's that.
So do I. We all do. I love it.
Yeah, that's the beauty about photography. Nobody knows it all, and you're still always learning from other people. And that's one of the great things about it. It's so vast. You can never stop learning. Again, it's a lifetime journey. For most of us, it's something that I think about photography and art almost every second of the day.
Yeah.
So that's where it is, and it's great to have people like you and the other guests that I've had on, because we all have a passion for this. Well, actually, passion passed us a long time ago. It's obsession. Most of us have to do this. So if I don't get out and shoot for a month, I get jittery.
I'm the same way. I'm the same way.
It's a nicotine thing. But okay, so that was great. I enjoyed that conversation. We're running out of time again. Thanks for joining me. So where can people find your work and get a hold of you?
F64 Academy is the best place. www.f64academy.com. I'm wearing the shirt the whole time. But that's kind of like where all of the stuff is. I mean, I do branch off into many different places, but that's the place that you can find me most. So,
well, you've got F64. I'll mention F64 Elite, which is a monthly subscription club. I'm a member of it. I've been there for about 6 months. So there's that available as well. People can find you on YouTube.
mm-hmm.
People will find you on my website after we go live on this interview. So those are the 4 spots I think that we can get you. We're gonna have to work on you on Facebook.
Yeah. Well, I have a Facebook page. It's like a Blake Rudis Facebook
personal
page.
Facebook page.
I have a business Facebook page too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Blake Rudis. It's just Blake Rudis, and then the CF64 Academy stuff on there.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. We gotta get you motivated.
Yeah, it's hard charge. I just don't have time to stop for that. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. So I want to thank you for being on. As always, it's been a pleasure to meet you and talk to you. I really believe in this course. The actual course, I think, where can they get the course, Blake?
That course, that's in the Zone System Express is where I talk about that. It's the big course that also comes with a panel for Photoshop to help you with this, so that you can just push buttons and make colors happen. Basically, I don't know how else to put it, but that's in the Zone System Express, which can be found on F64 Elite. There's links to it on F64 Academy. You can Google search Zone System Express. The ebook that we've been talking about was an exclusive ebook that was put out for On1 users actually last year. But when you become an F64 Elite member, it's gifted to you in the email, the first email that you get. So that's all part of the F64 Elite thing to get you interested in thinking about these color theory concepts to another level. So that's part of the F64 Elite thing, but it's not necessarily something that I sell. It's more of a gift.
Gift, yeah, okay. So there you go. If you join F64 Elite, which is $20 American, $900,000 Canadian, that's how the Canadian dollar drops.
Sorry about that.
It's not your fault. Just kidding. Just kidding. Join it. I would suggest anybody join it. You know what? Like I said, I've been a member for about 6 months. He did a YouTube video on the Zone system. That's how I got a hold of it. Stop it. Timer going off. We're running out of time. So that's how I got it. I would suggest anybody join it. If you're interested in learning Photoshop, it's a great way of doing it. I think what we should do is maybe, I know you're on version 3.6 of the Zone system, and what we'll do is maybe do a show in the Zone system as well later, and then everybody can understand that as well, because I use it a lot. It's not one of my main things, but like you said, your workflow is not my workflow. And
right.
How I do my workflow is not necessarily going to be the best for what I want or what you do. And my workflow, depending on what I'm working on, I do a little bit of fine art, infrared photography. My workflow will change depending on what I'm working on.
Right.
Well, that's a good thing. So again, I'm over time, so I got to cut this. Again, thanks for joining. I really appreciate it. Thanks to Shaw TV for letting me use their studio. Thanks to my wife's in the control room there. Started all the video for us, and we'll see you next time. Oh yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll leave a link to Blake's YouTube channel, which is a great. Every week he puts out a YouTube video. They're great. I love them. Great information coming from them. I got to run. See you next time on Who Said Photography, guys. Thanks.
Thanks.
Hey, thanks for watching. Sit, Sigma, sit. Oh, stop looking at